Hello and welcome to episode 64 of the Alfa Romeo Driver Podcast, brought to you by the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. I'm Guy Swarbrick, and with me this afternoon is Peter Smart of Peter Smart Classic Alfas. Good afternoon, Peter.
Good afternoon, Guy.
So we'll talk about the business later on, but we traditionally start these things by talking about how you got here in the first place. So how did you get interested in Alfas originally?
Basically, my dad was an unusual car owner back in the day when I was younger. And he always had quirky cars, and he had Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint GTs when they were current cars. And I travelled around in the back of them as a young child. So that's how it stems. I think it's also in the family as well, because my great grandfather was Italian, so it's sort of in the family a little bit as well.
Yeah, and so your father had Alfas. What was your first Alfa?
At the age of 21, I'd had a succession of fast Fords. I'd been through the fast Ford era, and my first Alfa was an Alfetta GTV6. It was 5 years old. So, yeah, it's quite a car for someone at 21 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. And how it's always a delicate question to ask, given the era. But how solid was it at 5 years old?
Bodily, rust-wise, it was okay. It wasn't a bad car. It was the mechanical side of them, as you probably know, that the Busso engines, the early ones in GTV6s, you know, they did tend to smoke after not many miles. They suffered with valve guide wear and stuff. And I have to admit that at the age of 21, I wasn't quite into fixing cars at that point of my career, and I did spend a lot of money at other garages and stuff. Yes, getting the car fixed.
Just for the benefit of the listeners, the noise in the background is Ian Brookfield, who was on an earlier podcast, who is hitting bits of metal with a large hammer. So how long did you have that car?
I probably had that a couple of years, and actually there's a slightly interesting story on that in terms of the engine rebuild, because that actually led me into meeting Roberto Giordanelli, who actually only lived literally up the road from me, where I was living at the time. And yeah, that sort of stemmed my interest in going the way of my career is now in terms of fixing the cars. And I did work for Roberto for about a year later on in my, probably another 6 years later, I actually did some work with him. But he probably got me into the motorsport side of Alfa Romeos as well.
And we'll definitely talk about that in a minute. So that was the first car. Now, for people outside the trade, my next question is usually to ask them, how many Alfas they've had and talk through the history. But every time we have somebody who's in the trade, that becomes a very difficult question to answer.
It does, yes, because we always seem to end up with lots of cars over the years. I did tend to keep my cars for a couple of years. I wasn't one for buying one, running it for a couple of months and then moving on to another one. I did hang on to them for a bit. So yeah, after I'm trying to think, after the GTV6, I think I probably slightly downgraded a little bit. I think I then moved on to, I think I had a 33 possibly after that, a 1.5 gold cloverleaf, if memory serves me right. I then had a very late Giulietta RS saloon, the limited edition one they did towards the end. I've had several 75s and then also several 164s as well. So,
and given your father's ownership history, I know a big part of the business is preparing 105 series cars, but did you eventually end up owning a 105 car?
I did, yes. That sort of moves on how my career's panned out, to be fair, because initially at the age of 19, when I decided to actually go out and do some work, I actually went to work for a bank, of all things.
Right.
And I worked for a bank for the first 7 years of my life, and then took voluntary redundancy from the bank. And that's when I went for the career change and got into the motor trade. So that I had a reasonable payoff from the bank, and I basically started buying and selling old Alfas. And yes, I got my first 105 that way. And that actually, it was a 105 that I bought, and actually for some reason no one wanted to buy it. And at that point I was thinking wanted to go racing. I'd been watching the Alfa Championship and following them around the various UK circuits and stuff, and thought I'd like to have a go at this. I ended up converting this 105 I couldn't sell.
So that's a nice segue. Talk us through the racing career. When did that start, and how did it progress?
Yeah, I had my first race towards the end of 1994. I think it's through the Owners Club at the time. They were trying to launch a classic Alfa race series. And I did my first ever race was at Castle Combe in this classic Alfa race series. And I drove the car to the circuit and fortunately drove it home again. Trundled around near the back, but no, had great fun. And then a few weeks later, I went up and drove all the way up to Donington Park as well and did that. So they were the two races I did in 1994. And then in 95, I decided to get myself a trailer and a tow car and do it a bit slightly more professionally than driving it and worrying about whether I broke it or not. And the next two years I did what was the Italian Intermarque Championship back in 95 and 96. And actually in 95, I was the Italian Intermarque class champion. So that was good.
And that was that still in the 105 that you couldn't sell, or was that a different car by then?
Yeah, that was in my green. It was green. It was Oliver Verde. It was an unusual colour as well. It wasn't a red one. And I had that car for a number of years. It did end up getting repainted retail red at one point. I seem to remember in the late 90s. But no, I raced that car on and off, for probably the next 10 years or so. And then actually I met my current wife and we moved down to Dorset, and the car actually just, unfortunately, with the business sort of moving on a bit then and having a new home and family started, the race car sadly got put to one side, and it was just sitting there. And I thought, at the moment, I can't see when I'm going to use it again. I was a bit short on storage, so I advertised it and sold it, and always regretted selling it. But bizarrely, I then went on to sell it a further 3 or 4 times to various different people, because everybody who bought it back to me to sell on their behalf again.
And is that car still competing?
The car is still currently competing with the HSCC in the 70s Road Sport Series.
Brilliant. Fantastic stuff. The racing took a break then. How long was it before you were back on track?
I was back on track probably early 2010s, basically. I bought a 75 Twin Spark, already race-prepared car. And I did the classic touring car pre-93 series with that. Had some good fun in that. And then I actually bought an old Class F Alfa Sud TI in 2011 from Ian Brookfield that had been languishing in his garage, one of his cars. And I then, in 2012, went and did the Classic Touring Cars Group 1 Championship in the Sud TI that I'd bought, and actually won the class with that and finished second overall to a Rover SD1.
Brilliant. And you're still racing now, nearly 30 years after you started. I think I most recently saw you out at Festival Italia at Brands Hatch.
Yeah, with the blue Giulia TI now, which again it was a car that I bought last year. It was offered to me. I couldn't turn it down. So we got it. It hadn't been used for quite a number of years as a race car, so we recommissioned it and got it back on track, and it's performing very well. Seemed to
be doing all right. Yeah, that was another class win, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, I've had a few class wins. I've done a couple at Brands Hatch with the HSCC and the HRDC. I had a class win at Mallory Park with the HRDC and another class win at Snetterton as well. So this season's been good with that car.
And anybody who goes to events like the HRDC races will see a lot of Peter Smart Sunstrips. How many race cars are you preparing at any one time, or have built?
We've built quite a few cars. We mainly building engines for cars at the moment. We we went through a couple of years ago of building quite a lot of engines for the HSCC 70s Road Sport series. So yeah, that's been good. I've done quite a lot of race support over the last few years as well for customers at the HSCC meetings. So no, that side of the business is very good. And yeah, it's something that we enjoy doing as well. Is the race stuff.
And are you planning to keep on racing that Blue Julia, or have you got something else, another project in the pipeline?
No, I will continue racing the Blue Julia TI. Hopefully, yeah. Whether I might do another one this year. We got one more HRDC race at Silverstone Grand Prix towards the end of October. Just thinking about whether I do that or hopefully another fullish season next year with it.
Brilliant. So let's go back to the business a little. You said you started off, you did the year with Roberto and then started buying and selling. So yes. Was that more of a conventional garage business, for want of a better phrase, initially? When did the motorsport preparation side of things start?
That's not started until more recently in terms of the motorsport side of it. I would say when Ian came to work for me and stuff, with his background in motorsport as well. So the two of us, combined, and that's how the sort of motorsport side of it has developed a bit more, and especially in terms of race support and stuff as well.
And you started off because of the GTV6. I think you're probably known, certainly particularly for looking after 105 series cars. So how did the business develop on the road car side of things?
Well, basically, when I moved down to Dorset, I was still just buying and selling cars and stuff, and I had sort of time on my hands when I was waiting for the phone to ring for people to want to come and buy cars and stuff. I was thinking, well, what do I do? So I went out and I found a 105 project car and basically restored that and then sold it on. And cut a long story short, it was something that suddenly other people heard about, that I was doing this, and it's sort of developed from there, as it were. We probably do about 50-50 between road car restorations and race car preparation and stuff.
Okay. And does it tend to be people coming in for full restoration, or is the kind of basic maintenance and repair work alongside that as well?
Yeah, we normally have a couple of cars in at one time for full restorations. Currently, we've got a lovely little 1600 Duetto Spider that we're doing a full restoration on for a customer, alongside an Alfa TI as well. So Ian's very excited about having the TI
yeah,
in.
I'm sure. Bit of cross-selling for his business there as well.
Exactly. Yes. So no, in terms, and then we got day-to-day work that comes in and goes as well. I've got a few local-ish customers, but most people that come to me, they'll travel from here, there, and everywhere. I've had people from way up north. I've just done a big rebuild on a customer based up near Blackburn and stuff. So, and again, like I've done East Riding of Yorkshire. So, my name's out there and people seem to be prepared to travel.
And any particular either favourites amongst the cars that you've worked on, or unusual cars that you've worked on?
I've always been brought up with 105. So 105s is the love really for the cars. Probably I haven't worked on anything really unusual. A couple of Montreals have been through my hands at one point and stuff. And again, I did go down the route of becoming a bit of a specialist in 2600 Spiders with one customer, because he kept buying them for some reason and then getting me to fix them. So yes, I do tend to know a reasonable amount of 2600 Spiders, but whether that's a good or a bad thing, I don't know.
Well, if you know a reasonable number, that must be quite a high proportion of all of them in the UK.
Yes.
Any plans for the future of the business? I mean, you're busy with two cars and routine work and the motorsport preparation.
Yeah, I mean, it works quite well between myself and Ian. We it's only a small business, and we work really well together. He works quite well on the mechanical side of stuff, and I'm a bit more of a bodywork and person and stuff. So the two of us work well together. at the moment, I've got no intention of expanding and getting too big and everything. I'm quite happy with the business as the size it is at the moment.
I know we're all trying to forget it, but the pandemic had an interesting effect on the classic car industry. I think probably one that most people wouldn't have predicted, in that lots of people ended up really busy. How was it for you?
Exactly that. It was really busy. And it worked out really well because we had a couple of biggish, what you'd call resto mod jobs on a couple of 105s that we did. So it enabled us to actually get those completed a little bit quicker than we'd hoped. So that was good for the customer. He could get his car back a bit sooner than he anticipated and stuff. So from that point of view, the pandemic, it didn't really have an effect on us. We both, Ian and I, came in, did our work and went home again. Didn't see anybody.
And you mentioned resto mods. It was always a potentially controversial area. How moddy are your resto mods? What kind of things do you do to bring them up to date?
We basically we go with what the customer likes. I mean, I'm open to whatever the customer wants on their car. I don't disagree or agree with what they do. So, it's down to the customer. If they want that on their car, I'm happy to do it. Again, I'm equally happy to build someone a completely standard original car if they want as well. So I'm not bothered either way, which I love a resto mod, and there's great things out there in terms of the parts and what you can build and stuff. But equally, it's also nice to build some completely original standard cars as well. And we've just completed a lovely little Giulia 101 Spider that came to me basically in a big box of bits. And again, we've built that back to completely standard, a lovely original car.
And anything that you haven't worked on that you would like to work on?
Yeah, we're probably could be getting a bit exotic and stuff, and I'm probably never like to see one in my lifetime. And it's a car I'd love to own as well, is like a TZ1 or even a Giulietta SZ. I think they're lovely little cars.
Yeah, Giulietta SZs, there's probably more of them around that aren't in museums than there are TZ1s.
Yeah. But no, they're both lovely looking cars. And I'd love to own either of those cars, as well as obviously being a 105 person, I'd love to own a real GTA if the opportunity arose. Obviously, my preference obviously relates to a lot of the old stuff. I don't, as a business, we don't tend to do anything much past our Feta GTV6s and stuff like that. I leave the modern cars to modern specialists to be able to fix. I've just never had the inclination to invest in all the computer diagnostics that you need for modern cars and stuff. So,
and I guess on the 105, 116 side of things, we're probably actually at a point now where the numbers are pretty steady, and if anything, growing, because there's still a few cars coming in every year from Europe. So it's almost the opposite of modern cars, where the number of cars on the road goes down every year. Your customer base is probably growing, if anything. Yes,
I've seem to be regularly each year taking on several new customers and stuff. And there's new people who always loved the 105 and love to buy them. So there's always seems to be new people coming into the 105 series, as well as other older Alfas as well. So
what is the setup? If somebody walks into Peter Smart Classic Alfas, what can they expect? What does it look like
in terms of the workshops and setup?
Yeah, and the facilities, and
we've got a lovely little reception area that you come in. We're both hands-on as much as we can be. I tend to be a little bit more behind the desk, and Ian doing a lot of mechanical work. So we've got a couple of ramps, and we've got indoor facilities that we can get at least 7 cars inside. We've got obviously a lot of proper Alfa special tools for the 105s, which we do actually regularly use, which is very good. And, we've got a lot of up-to-date equipment, modern-day big presses and glass cabinets and stuff. So I try and do as much restoration work in-house as I can. The only things that we don't do is painting, but I've got a very good painter locally who's semi-retired, who picks and chooses what he wants to do. Fortunately, he loves doing the Alfas, but he does mainly high-end cars, Ferraris, Rolls Royces, Bentleys and stuff. So no, he's been a fantastic chap over the last few years to get hold of in terms of doing the paintwork on our restorations.
Are there any challenges that you have in terms of, I know it's probably got better, if anything, but in terms of parts that you can't get, things that you have to fabricate rather than buy because you can't buy them?
Restoring 105s is relatively straightforward these days because you can buy virtually anything for those cars off the shelf one way or another. It's the 750 and 101 cars, which we have restored quite a few of those. And obviously panel work is non-existent for those basically. So they prove a bit more of a challenge to restore and stuff. So yeah, we are having to fabricate quite a bit for when we do restorations on those cars. And actually the same with our Feta GTVs. Our Feta GTVs, they've always been the poor relation to the 105 in terms of parts supply and stuff. But I mean, hopefully there's companies out there that are moving forward with bits. So,
and you talked about the fact that I can't remember, you said you have had recently a SUD in the workshop. Is that another string to the bow in, as well as the 105s and 116s, or was that a one-off? I guess it's not a huge pool of cars to work on anyway.
No, it's actually not a bad SUD because we've stripped it back to a bare shell and everything, and it actually doesn't need a huge amount of welding to it. It's amazing how some of these Alfa SUDs actually have survived over the years. So no, I mean, I'm more than happy to restore anything from, say, Alfa SUDs, our Feta GTVs, but obviously our main core is the 105s and also the older, say, 750 101s again. We've restored a few of those over the last few years, and I've owned a Giulietta Sprint many years ago. I loved it. Great cars as well.
I guess the other thing we haven't really talked about is the club. So you talked about the fact that you got involved in the race series initially because the club was recruiting. How far into your Alfa journey did you join the club, and how active have you been locally? I know you do things with the Wessex section now.
Well, I can tell you it's my 30th anniversary this year of being a member of the Alfa Romeo Owners Club.
Which is not bad out of 56.
So I joined in 1992. So I would have joined, probably not long after, or probably still owning the GTV6, I think. But certainly I remember fondly going to the National Alfa days when they were at Stamford Hall and stuff. They were good days.
Yeah, and very different kind of atmosphere, wasn't there? When lots of people selling parts.
Yeah, exactly. It's when you had proper old-fashioned stall holders.
Yeah. I remember going there with a friend who naively was trying to get a rear bumper for a 75 V6. And lots of people had front bumpers for 75 V6s, but nobody had a rear. And every time he asked them whether they had a rear as well, they kind of laughed at him and said, no, the reason I've got a front is because that one went off backwards into a tree, which is exactly what he'd done with his.
Yeah.
That's been brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Peter.
That's great, Guy. Thank you very much.
Well, that's all for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time on Sunday, the 2nd of October. Episode 65 will be available to download from 1:30 p.m. from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere else good podcasts are found. Until then, stay safe.